Alright, another draft science video presentation. Yay. So anyway, I guess I should mention, I did make a video last night on the free money, easy money, to a physicist, and I won't go over it again, but the money increases as pledges increase, so it's up to $650 to a channel that has some notoriety. And willing to publish it on their channel, a conversation about the weakness of the evidence for conventional physics. That it is essentially faith-based. You just have to have faith in the physicists and their integrity and their capacity to be true to the evidence and not manipulate the experiment to make the experiment do what they want it to do, and all of that stuff. And it's really just that. The evidence is very weak, it's very interpretatable, it's very easily manipulated by just changing how you measure something. You know, what kind of film you use to detect the electrons, for example. And whether you're detecting X-rays or whether you're detecting electrons becomes an open question. And all kinds of, there's so many details to every experiment. You know, it's just the rabbit out of the hat trick thing. You know, it's all just a trick. It can be just a trick. You know, you do something a certain way, it can look magical. You know, people can do little hand tricks. You know, you can roll the cigarette across their fingers, do some other kind of thing, and it looks like something. Well, no, just a little practice, it's easy. Juggling, yeah, lots of things. It's just a trick to it. Everything is a trick to it, and understanding the tricks changes the physics. Anyway, that's a little bit of a long intro. Anyway, so on to the more important things, I suppose. So Google, you could just go on and on about all the, so just the example of Google bought YouTube a decade ago, and the search got worse, right? So searching YouTube videos by category, by keywords, by all that stuff actually worked better before the search engine company took over YouTube, which is funny. So now you do a search and it's all just thrown into a pile. They're not even true to the words you type in the search. Okay, so they'll tell you that, oh, you're looking for this specific thing. Well, that word sounds a little bit like, you know, dog sounds like mog. So we'll give you some MOG results too, and we'll give you all kinds of other results. I found it the most glaring thing recently was just when I typed in physics and searched, and it was useless. I mean, it was terrible results, right? It's all a bunch of Spider-Man cartoony video thingies. Apparently the Spider-Man game you can throw shit off of cliffs, and so they call that physics. Throwing stuff off a cliff is physics. You know, and so you just get that, and you get, you know, live from India. You know, stuff you can't, you know, it's not in English. And no way to filter it, no way to do anything. You're just stuck with, oh, okay, I have to go through these 4 million results to find one that's relevant on the subject. You know, they're just terrible tools. And it's the company in charge of indexing the internet. They can't even index YouTube. They can't index the comments. You can't search anything. You can't know anything. You want to know how many subscribers? Oh, I got to go to his channel. Oh, I got to go to his about page. Oh, I got to go do this. You got to go looking all over the place to find out what the hell is this asshole who's making comments. His account is 1 day old. I mean, all of this stuff should be easily labeled and marked. We should know what we're looking at when we're looking at it. You know, they're profiling us constantly, right? They're constantly watching every single thing we do on the internet. Every mouse movement, they're following it. Yes, they have actually scripts that they're following the mouse movement. They're watching how long your mouse is over an image, how long it's over this. They're counting all of that stuff, and they tell us none of it. They show us none of it. They give us no information. We get no value for all of that gleaned data. And why? Because they want us stupid. They want us ignorant. They want us not knowing what's going on, because that makes us easier to fool. And that's all they're interested in doing, is creating false impressions and false clicks and false this, because it's all real revenue for them. All that false crap is real revenue for them. So yes, they engineer it not to work because it's more money for them. The less efficiently I can move around in the internet, the more efficient it is for Google. And that's the kind of crap you've put in charge of your providing of information. We're allowing the information provider, and that's what Google essentially is. Putting a website on the internet means absolutely nothing, because it's not on the internet until Google says so. Okay, if it's on the 17th page on keywords, it's not on the internet. Okay, nobody can get to it realistically. They have to get some friend to link on their page, and then some other friend to link on their page. They have to create false popularity, which is a whole industry that most websites are bought into. They're all doing this networking thing so they can spam Google's dumbass algorithm. It's a stupid, ignorant algorithm. Doesn't know fake from real. And so most of the stuff you get is hype. It's been the stuff that was hyped, not the stuff that's really popular. Just like the stupid viral videos. You know, they're not really popular because Google knows that people clicked on it and clicked off of it in less than 30 seconds. They know that some of these viral videos that have 1 million views, Google knows that nobody went to it because of the content of the video. They went to it because it's clickbait, because it has an image or a title that's just a lie. And Google knows those videos, and yet they still let them go viral. They still promote them, even though they know nobody stayed on this video. Nobody even played the video. You know, all of the viral was completely fake. It was completely a fraud. You know, they don't do any of this. They're supposed to be the professionals, the experts at this stuff, and they don't do any of it. They can't tell trolls from real people. They can't tell anything from anything. Well, the fact is they could, but the point is that doesn't make them money, and that's what they found out. Feed the idiocracy. The idiocracy will pay Google. Smart people won't. All right. Baldy Catz. Okay, so his hypocrisy has been just demonstrated. The first debate after the one he canceled because the person is too, unrespectable, too horrible. And he does a debate with a lunatic woman who's not only a stupid religious kook, but an especially hateful religious kook. Okay, especially scapegoating. Oh, all the problems in the world are caused by the homos. You know, complete just idiocy. Gross, disgusting, putrid philosophy. Just a bunch of hate rhetoric out of an old, cruddy testament. Oh, that's okay. Yes, let's hear some more of that story. You know, I mean, what a fraud. So it's outed, The weird thing is that AB Science, okay, quite a qualified physicist, kind of a surprising story. Somebody goes from being kind of a musician and decides later in life, so to speak, that, this ain't going to pay the bills, or this isn't interesting enough, or something. And really, had to do a lot of work to get I think he has a full doctorate in physics. I mean, pretty impressive. And is now doing some sort of complex, stupid quantum bullshit of some kind, no doubt. But anyway, so he commented, on my bribery offer, and, implying that somehow you don't have to bribe these people and blah, 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 blah. You just make your point and then they'll make a counter argument. No, I've done that, okay? So there's lots of my videos, the overview videos, I have them in playlists, they're briefer. It's physics. You really can't do it briefly. If I do it briefly, it's just going to sound like any tinfoil hat. Oh, relativity isn't true because it's not true. I mean, you can't really do that. You do have to explain why, well, let's look at the different elements of the evidence, okay? The Eddington experiment, well, there's obviously that case a bit suspect, and the fact that it's never been redone with a better telescope is also suspect, and the fact that it's never been done from space also makes it suspect. So we can maybe start talking about the fact that maybe all this gravitational bending of light thing may not be right. It might not be true. The Hubble telescope images are weird. Okay, they're not what the math would say they should look like. They're not consistent. They're not symmetrical. They're not all the things gravity imposes, a rational description of gravity. And then you have to introduce dark matter. So then there's a whole other subject where you have to talk about how it's just made up. It's a God of the gaps answer. I mean, it's just, well, we can't figure it out, so let's just invent some invisible magic band that makes things happen. I mean, it's just so obviously God of the gaps bullshit. You don't understand, therefore invent a magic thing that did it. It's so obvious. Well, see, I guess you could do the argument in 3 minutes, but I just mean it's not really good enough to do that, because you have to explain how, oh yes, these other experiments where they pick up scatter, yeah, that's the problem. It's scatter. It's not lensing. You can't tell the difference from, when the light's hitting you, you can't tell where it's been. Okay? All you see is the light. You don't see where have you been. Did you get scattered or did you get bent by gravity? You can't tell the difference because both things can be slow or fast. Both things can have, you can be two gravitational fields a photon move through, therefore slowing it down in terms it has a longer path length. And the same thing with scatter. You can scatter off one electron and then scatter off another electron and scatter off another electron. The light you see from the atmosphere, okay, when you look up and you see that the sky is bright, that light can be scattered from the photons you're looking at can be scattering off more than one electron, therefore taking a longer path to get to you, therefore changing its phase and blah 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 blah. Well, anyway, see all those things. Well, anyway, so I pointed out that I've already been there and done that. So the video, it's an unlisted video. I probably should have just made it a public video, but it's a little awkward. It's not as because I'm trying to be careful in what I say. So anyway, it's an unlisted video, 21 minutes long. If you skip the first 5 minutes, if you know what the two-slit experiment is, and you skip the first 5 minutes, then it's only 15 minutes long. But anyway, so I'll link it below in the description just for the sake of it. But yeah, it goes through just this two-slit thing mostly, and explains exactly where all these problems lie in the theory, and where the cheats have taken place, where they've presented you the evidence and it distorted, where they've engineered the experiment. That is, they worked on the experiment, could get it to work, and then they could get it to work if they applied a little bit of a trick, and then it works. And that's the chicanery that's gone on, and they cited experiments that never have been done and never have been done well. So lots of things like that. And it would be nice to hear a response, okay, as I did with Baldy Catz, and I still am doing with Baldy Catz. Please, just provide me a link to the video done right. So it would be nice if AB Science did a video on the two-slit experiment explaining how wave theory makes a lot of great sense. So go ahead and do that. Explain how the double slit pattern is created by two waves. Go ahead and try. The only way you're going to do it is to explain it by 4 waves, and then you're going to have to explain where these 4 waves came from and why they're in the wrong places. So good luck. That would be the challenge. I'm just saying he's feigning that this is that he has some real interest in defending science and that there is something to defend, when it's kind of obvious that it isn't true, because why else wouldn't people take the free money? If they could debunk me with just going, here's the experiment right here, here's the scientific paper explaining it all. If they could do that, then they would do it. So clearly they're not prepared, because they haven't really analyzed it. They haven't really looked and said, oh yeah, that Veritasium guy, when he did that single photon experiment, he did cheat. He had the photo detector turned all the way up, so he's getting 5 or 6 error photons a second. 5 or 6 error photons a second. They're not really errors, they're atmospheric photons. But you wouldn't see them, okay? If you turn it down, then you wouldn't see those little tiny cosmic ray type photons. All those would disappear from the detector. And so all you'd be getting is the real photons from the experiment. And so then you could wait hours between photons. You could, you could make it a more realistic time frame to ensure that you never have 2 photons in the experiment at the same time. But by turning it way up, he turned the error way up, and that means he had to turn the time cycle way up. And so you can see the cheat. You can see that, yeah, he spent a couple of days, he couldn't get it to work, and this was the way he got it to work. And he forced it to produce the results. Completely engineered the experiment to produce the results he wanted. Didn't show you, look, I turned it on and it worked. He didn't turn it on and it worked, clearly. So I'm just saying all of that takes time to go through all of the little details, all of the fact is it's not that simple. Even though something as simple as the radar experiment, I could point out over and over again how jamming is exactly the same math. If I was going to explain to you how to jam a signal, and I would use exactly the same geometry and exactly the same math to explain to you how, well, radio isn't light. I can't just broadcast it onto a screen and show you it. Okay, so this one I have to use a tuner. I have to tune in the frequency. And if I don't have a directional antenna, then I'm not going to be able to see the signals coming from the two out of phase sources, when the distances are different. But yeah, it's exactly if I was going to diagram jamming, it would be exactly the same mathematics, the same vector lines, the same sine thetas, the same bullshit would be exactly how I document jamming. And yet, with the assumption is, look, the two things hit each other. And there's no thing making any interference in the sense that there's no mechanism creating wave functions, right? I mean, the whole reason why laser beams don't crash into each other is because they're not wave functioning, right? But if we can make them wave function first, then they can interfere with each other. So you have to put them through a slit or something to wave function them, right? That's the argument, isn't it? All right, so anyway. Yeah. So anyway, so all Baldy Catz has to do to get his name off of these videos, right? Now, you'd say rationally that's what you'd want to do. You'd want to end this fight, end this whole controversy, get it out of my focus. And all he has to do is give me the link to the video on the YouTubes that does the two-slit right. That isn't fundamentally, elementally, and catastrophically flawed as an analysis. Something that isn't littered with false assumptions, false claims, and completely inaccurate descriptions of the actual experiment. So go ahead, show me that. Post that link, and then prove I'm not worth the conversation. All right. Or demonstrate some evidence that I'm not worth the conversation. Okay, so we'll move on to another bad scientist. This is all you can call these people. They're bad scientists. They're making a video on purpose. They're claiming they understand the experiment. They're claiming to understand the mechanism and all this stuff, and they're going to explain it to you because they understand it. So this isn't, these aren't acceptable answers. This person is claiming to know what he's talking about. It's like a mechanic in cars or something. You don't sit there and let some asshole say, oh, this is the air conditioning thingy and it's got a lot of pressure in it, but you can bang on it pretty hard and it doesn't blow up much. I never got blowed up yet. Much. No. And that's all this is, though. This is buffoon. They haven't done any research. They haven't looked at it, really. They've just read right out of the textbook, give you the standard crapola, and they can't even draw the damn thing right. I mean, they can't even use graphics that are actually accurate. That actually are, they can't, it's like, I'm not expecting you to be a great landscape artist or something, but I mean, shit, it's not that hard to draw the thing, okay? It's a two-slit pattern, little bars. How come you can't draw little bars accurately?
This video is sponsored by Great Courses Plus.
Yeah,
if you've been watching any of my videos on quantum mechanics, then you know that the smallest particles in nature behave in some very strange ways.
So again, they just keep saying, very strange, very strange. Well, it's not strange if you know what the hell a surface is made out of, and it's made out of atoms, and they have a whole bunch of electrons, on the outside of the atoms, okay, and that you're going to be sending little photons. Photons are little pieces of the photon anyway, are little tiny things, right? The whole photon's big, but the pieces inside are very, very small. And they might hit some of those electrons and bang off of them into a new direction. Woo, 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 woo. I mean, they technically don't do that. They get stuck. They move with the electron, and the electron hits another piece of the force from somewhere, and that little piece flies off at a new angle.
These particles include things like photons, electrons, atoms, even some molecules.
So here's an example, right? This is a double slit experiment, and what does he do? He has the big center thing. There's no big center in the double slit experiment, okay? The pattern doesn't create a big center. It doesn't create twice as big a central maxima. That's the single slit pattern, okay? And it certainly doesn't do this, whatever this thing is. I don't even know what this is. So he has it sort of backwards, right? He's doing dark to show you light. So even that doesn't, what the fuck sense does it make? I mean, it's really kind of a simple concept, on, off. And now he has off where the on should be. I mean, what the hell is that? Off makes a big hump? I mean, it's not that complicated, right? And, you know, to screw up little things like that because of, well, artistic license, you know, poetic license or something. What the? This isn't poetry. It's science. Come on, show the pattern the way it is, not the way you wish it was or how you fantasize about it. I mean, you know, this is painting 4 breasts on the women or something. This is just so bad.
You know that observation is synonymous with measurement.
Well, no, I don't know that actually. Okay, I really don't know that. Okay, the word observation is stupid, and the word measurement is kind of stupid. What there are interactions, yes, and to know something about something, I have to interact with it. Some piece of it, something has to reflect off of it. Some piece of it has to hit me. Something has to happen. It has to send me its waves. You know, it has to do something, and that's it. Yes, and with photons, guess what? There's no other thing to interact with the photon. There's nothing smaller than the bits of a photon, the force. Forces don't come in, you know, different sizes. It's all one little tiny bit of shit, force. And all you can do is put it at a frequency, and then you can, you know, segregate it based on positive and negative. But that's it. It's all the same little tiny stuff, so you can't see a force. You can't see a Volkswagen by plowing a Volkswagen into it. It's not going to make a very good image of the Volkswagen. You know, you getting hit in the head with a steering wheel isn't going to tell you much. You won't even tell you what car the steering wheel flew out of.
Slit experiment shows that they behave like waves of probability when not measured.
Yeah, it doesn't show any of that when not measured. So again, he's doing this stupid measurement thing, okay, which is just saying when not interacted with catastrophically. So if you don't crash the Volkswagen into a brick wall, it gets to shop right. But if you crash it into a brick wall, guess what? It doesn't get to shop right. Duh!
And quite strangely, when measured, these probability waves collapse.
So you know, these images are all horseshit. So they went right, they zoomed right past that one so fast I didn't get to point out how it's a pile of crap. So obviously here again, they have this light going in these directions, so the two clumps are separated. They won't be separated. The whole point is that the light's going in kind of parallel, okay, as rays, little parallel rays of waves, straight waves. And the straight waves come out, okay, if you're going to have a consistent theory. They don't go out at an angle. They're not diverging by a huge amount. So none of that happens. So we know the millimeter is still a millimeter on the screen, okay? There's no millimeters now 3 feet. That's not happening. So those two things, if the slits are a millimeter apart, well, those two clumps are going to be a millimeter apart at the screen, which means it's going to be a tiny difference on the screen, a difference you won't even see. So the two clumps will be right on top of each other. So again, they haven't done this, and they call this which way detector. Look, we put a which way detector in there. He hasn't talked about that yet. As if you can detect a photon. I can passively detect photons. No, you can't passively detect a photon. You can't passively detect a photon. You can't passively detect an electron. All you can do is crash big giant things into it and break them into pieces or something. You can't detect them. You can't watch them. You can't observe them without catastrophically interfering with their momentum.
Distinct particles. We also see from experiments like the delayed choice quantum eraser that two particles can become entangled.
Yeah, so that's another bullshit experiment, right? That's all based on a polarization theory that they didn't figure out what's causing even that. So they say it's a quantum eraser based on the fact that they aren't accounting for the fact that polarization is progressive. It gets more, you block more light the more the polarization's off. So like if you're 5 degrees, you only affect a few photons, 2%. And if it's 4 degrees, then it's 6%. And then it's 10 degrees, it's and when you get to 45 degrees, it's full 50% of the light is killed. But it's progressive. Okay, it's not. So when it's 22 degrees, they're saying it should be 25%. No, there's no law that says it should be 25%. Okay, at 22 degrees, the 45. It doesn't have to be half of 50 because it gets progressively more destructive to the photons going the wrong way. The ones going this way are more likely to be destroyed the more you go off the thing. A higher percentage of them get killed. So that simple explanation explains why it's 30% instead of 25%. And so all this whole thing is based on the fact that, look, that stays true. Yeah, of course it stays true. And so they're still saying that this means they've violated, the whatever his name is, non-equality bullshit. No, they didn't. Your premises are wrong. Your assumptions about what happens in the experiment are wrong. Just again, I've given this example 4,000 times. But yes, you could have a wrong assumption. I could be throwing frisbees through jail bars. And I could make a bet with some idiot, and, saying how I bet you I can get more of my frisbees through than you can. Okay, so the assumption would be, oh, it's 50-50, right? If I throw them this way, 50% get, they get blocked 100%. If I throw them this way, they get 100% through. But that's because they didn't think it through, right? So I would know that throwing this way, some percentage of them won't get through because they'll actually hit the bar, right? So it's not 50-50. So a minor little assumption wrong, the whole thing is horseshit. The whole theory is crap. And this is all they've based, this little tiny bit of evidence, they've built the entire entanglement nonsense on top of it. This piece of garbage is an experiment.
Meaning that they appear to be somehow intimately connected through the sharing of one probability wave.
No, there's no sharing of a probability wave. What the hell is that? It should be so, that is so goo goo gaga. I mean, they should be like, it should cringeworthy when you hear those words. It should be cringeworthy to somebody who has a scientific mind. What the hell is that? Imagine if they came up with rhetoric like that to talk about evolution. We have the humanness gene, and we gained humanness, I mean, it's just, it's disgusting.
Even if the particles are separated apart in space-time. And this behavior seems really strange to us because this is not something that we observe in our macro world.
Yeah, it is. You just don't pay any attention. But anyway, you don't realize that you do see it. You could make it the same, right? So he's going to throw tennis balls at a hard material that has a solid slit, right? I assume he's going to. I haven't watched the whole video. Well, you already know that that's not the nuclear universe. The nuclear universe doesn't have hard surfaces somewhere. There's no surface for electrons. There's no surface for the photons. The photons are seeing electrons in positions. If you want to say your clouds, they're seeing cloudy stuff, fog. A fog of electrons. They can't make a fog of tennis balls to make the surface out of, can they? No. So why would you think the two things are the same? From an electron's perspective, the slit looks like a slit. That the surface looks like a piece of steel in its way. No, that's not what an electron sees. That's not what a photon sees. A photon doesn't see it. It sees a bunch of empty space with a tiny, tiny, tiny number of little charged particles in there. It sees 99% black, empty space. That's what a photon sees when it looks at a piece of steel. Shit.
But why is that? Why don't we see this kind of strange and mysterious behavior in everyday lives? Why doesn't this tennis ball?
Because the nuclear universe isn't your universe, okay? It's a little bit far away from you. You're a bit removed. Not only do you have 100 billion just neurons, big giant cells, but you have to get into the numbers, like crazy numbers, trillions of atoms. I mean, 10 to the 20th atoms or something. I don't know. What's the real number? How many atoms are in a human body? I mean, it's a gigantic thing. It's so fucking humongous. It's like comparing the size of the universe to the size of a galaxy or something. It's just, you're so distant from the real universe. It would be idiotic for you to think the subatomic particles are looking at the same thing you're looking at. It's not Horton Hears a Who, okay? It's not humans all the way down. It's not eyeballs all the way down. Oh, God, this is so bad.
Behave like a photon, or an electron, or an atom. At what point does the quantum behavior stop and classical behavior?
Well, when you leave the atom-sized objects, that's where. So as soon as you're no longer dealing with atom-sized objects, you're no longer going to be dealing with effects on individual nuclear particles. You're going to be dealing with the composite objects that are moving around. The atoms are a composite, the molecules are composites, the compounds are composites. Okay, and then the compounds stuck to each other is composites. The other compounds that they're in is a composite. We're in a composite of an atmosphere, okay, full of atoms. We're not in empty space because we're on the Earth and we're stuck in a bunch of fluid, so to speak, a gas, but it's like a fluid, that we're wobbling through. Yeah, very different places, okay? Being in empty space, that's where the photons and the electrons are. They're in empty space. They're in a vacuum, okay? They're not in, okay, a fluid.
Behavior, everyday objects like this begin. And why is there a cutoff? The explanation is coming up right now.
Why is there a cutoff? Well, that's the simple one to answer, right? Because there's a huge difference between atom and electron. Big difference. And big difference between a bunch of molecules and an electron. And a big difference between a human being and an electron.
Scientists have shown quantum behavior in particles as large as molecules containing hundreds of atoms.
Yeah, that's just so they say they've shown quantum behavior. Now, all they've shown is that they can deflect them. That's it. Okay, that they can create a pattern. They can shoot them through an obstacle, and the obstacle will make them go in a direction. And that's all they've shown. And the pattern gets weaker and sloppier and uglier and less visible the bigger the object is. But it's still kind of silly to compare a clump of 100 atoms to an electron and then compare that to a photon, because they're all operating in the nuclear system, and they're going to operate it in a very different way. I mean, fundamentally, an electron is charged. So just imagine for a minute, I make two slits. What are the slits made out of? Atoms. What are atoms covered in? Electrons. Why can't you logically understand that electrons aren't going to like going through two slits with electrons between them on either side of them? As they get closer to the electron, see, this is the whole thing with charge, right? Charge is you can sense it from a place. Like an atom from a certain distance will look neutral. But if I get close to the atom, then I'm getting closer, presumably, to an electron. And if there's no electron there, then obviously I'm not seeing the electron, I'd just be seeing the proton, and it would look like a big positive charge. But if the electron's there, then it's going to get more and more negative as I get closer and closer to that atom. It's going to appear like it's negatively charged. Now, it's not negatively charged, but because I'm closer to the electron, I'm going to think it's negatively charged. It's going to be in every way negatively charged. So how can you think you can make a two-slit experiment for electrons? It doesn't make any sense at all. And then even flying through space, the electrons repel each other. So as they're flying through space, they would be separating from each other. I mean, yeah, well, it doesn't make any sense.
How large a particle can you get?
Doing the same, saying it's the same experiment, saying it's the same quantum effect, saying it's the same magical dark energy, whatever, I mean, this randomness God is the same thing as like dark energy. It's just made up. It's just a God of the gaps. You know, it's random. Because the random fairy went bing with her random wand. I mean, it's just too stupid. How can you fall for this crap?
Still show quantum behavior. What if I take this tennis ball and throw it at a double slit with a screen behind it that records the position of the ball when it hits the screen? What?
All right, so again, double slit, wrong pattern. Big giant center thing here. Why? Why do you have this gigantic thing in the center when it's not true? It's not the double slit pattern. I mean, they can't even put the right pattern in the graphics. Not only is it obviously, now they have it the right color though. Isn't this, I mean, look at the manipulation here. Why would somebody think it makes sense to show it in black and white one time and then show it as white and black the next time? Why would that make any sense to anybody? Why would somebody have those two images, the reverse of this, in contrast, right? The first time they showed us this, it was the dark spot was the middle, and now the light spot is the middle. You could see the manipulation here. All right, so it says interference pattern when individual atoms go through the double slit. So, and again, if I did it with radar, with two different radar guns, I'll get the same pattern, and I can theoretically argue to you that the light is still, the microwaves are still getting here, and they're still getting here, and they're still getting here, and the only thing that you've done is take two signals at the same frequency and sent them to the same location, and the receiver has said, no mas, I can't do that. Okay, you can't send me two equally strength signals and expect me to be able to figure out which one is which when they're out of phase. I can't receive either one.
If I take thousands of these tennis balls and throw it at a double slit, will I see the same kind of behavior that electrons or atoms have? No.
So they did it again. They're throwing them through the slits and making them diverge in this preposterous manner, which has nothing to do with the experiment. We know the laser beam wouldn't diverge that much. So the fact is the light goes through and it goes right in here to the center, and there's a millimeter of difference on this huge field. So this is like 2 inches across, this blob. And you're supposed to see 1 millimeter of difference. So just understand, there's 2 inches blob here in the middle, and one of them's 1 millimeter different than the other one. And you're supposed to tell the difference? No, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. They're being thrown exactly on the same spot. So it's just, these are all just deceptions. They're not true. It's not what the experiment does. It's a false impression. It's an exaggeration for a purpose, to make you think, okay, that somehow this isn't about collecting pieces in a certain location. See, if they smash that together, then you could logically understand, oh, so you're throwing pieces from one and you're throwing pieces from the other, and when the pieces when you have all 4 pieces, you make a whole photon again. See, they could make the piece argument make sense, but they don't even talk about pieces.
Of course not. I'll just see 2 patterns on the back wall. Why doesn't this thing behave like electrons or atoms? It's made up of atoms and electrons around it. 6 trillion atoms. Why doesn't the whole behave like the individual particles? Because
the slit you're throwing at it isn't a nuclear one anymore. You're not doing it nuclearly, and nuclearly means there's a lot more empty space. The smaller you get, the more empty space you also create. The more distance there is between interactions, relative distance to size. And the less there is, the bigger you get. Except when you go out in the big universe, then the space gets big again. But yeah, obviously they're not the same thing. I'm just saying, why would you think a tennis ball is the same and it's living in the same world that an electron is living in, when you already know that's not true, because you already know that an atom is mostly empty space? So why would you think the two things could ever be the same, or similar, or comparable? It's not just apples and oranges, it's apples and frickin' think of something. Telephones.
Made up of. To answer this, we have to understand some of the basics of quantum mechanics. Let's look at how the double slit experiment works with light first. The results are the same with electrons or atoms.
They keep saying that thing. The results are the same. They're not the same. I would argue that they haven't even done the experiment with real electrons because they cheat in the electron experiment. See, the trick with electrons is how you detect an electron. We don't really have an electron detector, frankly. We have energy detectors. And some of them, like fluorescent films and such, they'll glow if you hit them with an electron, but they'll also glow if you hit them with an X-ray or, ultraviolet light. So you could argue that when you're making electrons, you're creating a bunch of other radiation. The heat has more than just infrared light in it. It has X-rays and other kinds of things in it, and that's what's really pushing the electrons. So what you're really doing is just doing the light experiment and calling it the electron experiment. You're just using a higher frequency light. That is, you're using ultraviolet or X-rays.
Richard Feynman called this the central mystery of quantum mechanics.
Right. This is the reason. This is the woo they use. This is the experiment they use as an excuse, okay, to create this whole woo-averse out of quantum mechanics, to make up all of this silly crap. And again, the whole entanglement thing was an inverse thing. I mean, everything they joke about, they turn the joke into some sort of like Schrodinger cat. You know, like they choose to make the mockery into some sort of rigid, solid block. Oh, of course, it's Schrodinger cat, because Schrodinger cat means, yes, it's both alive and dead, and yes, it's real, and that's, yeah, they're trying to make that not ridiculous. And this whole freaking entanglement thing came up because Einstein did a right and left-handed glove thing and just kind of pointed out how, you know, if you knew the right hand, you'd know the left hand, you know the other glove, because you do have knowledge, because of the circumstance that created the thing, so you can know its spin, okay, without measuring it. You just measure this thing over here. You destroy this one, and you know everything you want to know about this one. And then they turn that into ESP. I mean, it's just, it's so, the history is so ludicrous. It's just totally a mockery. And again, let's understand, Richard Feynman actually believed in the random God. So when Bohr said back to Einstein, when Einstein said God doesn't play dice with the universe, and Bohr said, don't tell God what to do, Feynman is on Bohr's side. He really thinks there is a random God. There is some bizarre whatever. There's a bizarre whatever that has somehow got a little random wand and just says, oh, I'm going to randomize that. Oh, randomize that. Yeah, randomize that. There's not a mechanical cause. He actually believes there's not a mechanical cause. And why does he believe there's not a mechanical cause? Why? Because Feynman had his head so far up his own ass, he was so full of himself, he said, well, if I can't think of what the mechanical cause could be, nobody can, because I have a gigantically huge brain, and I'm the smartest man in the universe, and I have a Nobel Prize to prove it, and nobody's as smart as me, and if I can't figure it out, you fuckers have no hope. That's his fucking attitude. Now, I like Feynman. I mean, he's an interesting little character as a human being. But he, as a scientist, he was a piece of shit. Okay, he talked the talk. He didn't walk the walk. He talked about discipline and not jumping to conclusions, all this stuff. And, you know, talking about knowing your shit. But he didn't walk the walk.
When we shine a monochromatic light, that is light of only one wavelength, through two slits.
So again, wrong pattern. Let's just keep pointing out. Wrong pattern. Not only does it not have the nodes far enough out, right? So it doesn't show the envelope pattern, right? I mean, huge. I mean, I should have mentioned that, right? It's obviously not showing the real two-slit experiment in the sense that we don't have the envelope pattern, right? But more, just sitting there, just looking at you is plain and obvious. They're showing a single-slit pattern. They're showing the double-sized maxima in the middle. I mean, he can't even get that detail right. Again, two waves will not create the pattern. No hope.
It hits the screen, we see an interference pattern on the other side, because as the waves spread out, the crest of one wave hits the crest of another, it becomes stronger. Where a crest hits a trough, it will cancel. This should be no big mystery. This is not quantum mechanics. This is just a property of waves. It'll have...
Yeah, no. It's a property of water waves, and it's only, again, the water waves won't do what this is doing. It won't do what you're showing here. Okay, and again, it won't have the same size nodes. There's all kinds of different things it won't do. And this whole idea of projecting it on a flat screen is completely retarded, because you know it's getting distorted as you go further away. Those little bars will be getting fatter and fatter and fatter as you go further away, because you're projecting it on an infinite plane. And so you can't even figure that out. So he's talking like, oh, it's just common sense to believe this wave crap. They can't even figure out the common sense that that's not what they're actually going to see, because as you go further and further, off of the center line, and you're projecting on an infinite plane, you're going to stretch the pattern bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. They can't even do that simple physics. And yet they're talking about this like, oh, you have to believe this. It's just so wavy.
Happen with water waves too. Now, what if we lower the intensity of the light and keep lowering it until our light source emits only one photon at a time?
Right. Now, this again, we don't even have the original French experiment, right? So the original French experiment that did this for the first time, supposedly, there's no evidence of it, okay? They just can't find it. You can't find a shred of evidence that this experiment was really ever done. But anyway, the story is that this French guy did it, okay? He created a film. He put a film over a light. And then he went sailing for 3 months, okay? And came back and on a photographic paper and saw the pattern. So he had so few photons going through that it took months for the pattern to expose a photographic film. Months. That's a single photon experiment in some sense, right? At least that's some hope of being more realistic. But still, you have to recognize that how do you know they're single photons? How did the photons get through the barrier you created? I mean, is there a little hole in the barrier and just one photon can get through it? Or can more than one photon get through the hole in the barrier? And it's just that you're sending so little light that it only, every now and then the candle flame flickers and a little bit of extra light goes through that area. I mean, you have no proof that you have this single photon in the atmosphere at a time. So it's not that simple an experiment to do. And again, we have no evidence of it. And so you can go to the Veritasium, the modern version, and I'll point out how, the obvious flaw in the experiment is he has the photodetector turned all the way up. He's getting 6 erroneous photons per second. Way too many.
Surely this should not create a wave pattern. When we shoot one photon at a time, it forms a dot on the screen. But if you fire enough of them, thousands or millions of photons, what you find is that collectively the photons form the same interference.
Right, so he did it again. Now it's back to being black. Okay, so he's using black on white. The photon is the black dot. I mean, too stupid. Really, just too stupid, right? This is too stupid, right? Okay.
Pattern. So somehow the photon either interacts with itself or somehow is able to communicate its part in the interference pattern.
Yeah, no. The real answer is that somehow you have more than one photon going through, because you really do need 2 different photons to go through the experiment. Well, you really don't. Okay, here's another catch. You can have one photon. Scatter could create it on a single surface. So that's sort of the catch, right? A single surface will also create a very faint pattern. And so the idea is that you could send a photon against the surface. We'll just use 2 to illustrate. And what will happen is that, we're saying the photon is a series of things. And so what you could do, okay, is have one interact with the electron, and that means its phase is going to be shifted. And you could phase shift it to a location here, okay, because of the distance differences. So one photon went through this place, one photon was a little bit different, and so the path lengths were different, or it reflected off here and went this way, right? So that's another way it could do it. One of them, the first little bit got deflected, went across, scattered again, and went over here, and then these bits all went through and let's say got deflected to this location. So they all go here, these 3. But this one, because it did this, instead of being the first, is now the 4th. So if the photon's moving this way, you can sort of understand the first one is taking a longer path. So it is now going to be out of phase, and that out of phaseness is going to put it at the end of these 3. So you could actually still have a photon that was destroyed and reconstructed that actually did hit the same surface. So it's theoretically possible. I'm just saying these are all things that have to be considered when you're talking about single photons, and they don't go into any of this depth. They do a superficial analysis, then do a crude experiment, and then say, look, we've proven it. And it's really rubbish. It's junk science. It's so engineered to confirm. It's not engineered to find the truth.
When fired one at a time. So since we want to find out what's going on at the slits, what if we put a detector there to determine whether the photon goes through slit 1 or slit 2?
So this is the big lie, okay, this detecting crap. And why you would put the detector in front of the slit, I have no clue, because that really doesn't sound like it's a good idea. You know, I mean, you might knock it into the other slit. I mean, how can you detect in before you go through the slit?
This is the most startling result of quantum mechanics, because when you try to find out which path the photon...
Alright, so this is again just nonsense. There's no such thing as a which-way detector. There's no way to detect passively an electron or a proton. And if they actually did this experiment, there's every reason for you to believe. Photons only push, okay? Photons don't do magic charge stuff. Photons don't make something ever move towards them, okay? Photons don't do that. Photons are electron pressure, they push electrons. That's it, okay? So they're going to obviously just push. It's going to be like you throwing a cue ball at a bowling ball. And you're just going to knock the bowling ball off course. You're just going to push the bowling ball. And so you're not going to have the same pattern. You're going to have a pattern moved over to the right or to the left, depending on which way your detector was pushing the electrons. So it's not like you're going to go revert to just two clumps. You're going to revert to clumps that are way in the wrong position still, because they did get affected. The electron was disturbed. The electron was moved. So, or the photon. I mean, the theory of hitting photons into photons is obviously ludicrous. There's no way to detect photons. So obviously there's no which way detector for a photon. It's just absolute nonsense.
Took, the interference pattern disappears. The photon appears to now behave like a particle instead of a wave. So what's going on?
So again, more fake, fake, fake. It's all just fake. It's not real. It's not the real images. It's not the real description. It's nothing like it. And again, he hasn't even talked about the real two-slitic pattern. So nowhere in this video will he talk about the real pattern. And isn't that failure just so grotesque? Let's pretend this double slit is the same pattern as the single slit, when it's obviously not. You just have to do the experiment and you'll see it's obviously not the same pattern.
Let's talk in the language of the Copenhagen interpretation, which is the most accepted interpretation of quantum mechanics. This was
most accepted by a tiny margin. So 40% versus 32% for the other horse shit. And now that Sean Carroll's pushing his crazy, stupid, loop-de-doo book on many worlds, I'm sure many worlds is gaining fast. Maybe it's overtaken Copenhagen. The fantasy fairy tale of multiverses is now the scientific answer. And you're saying I'm out of bounds calling you a religion? I mean, this is a religion.
Conceived by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg at the University of Copenhagen.
Yeah, two douchebags.
Around 1927. This interpretation basically says that these so-called particles are not particles at all, but really like clouds. They are in multiple states at the same time. They're like waves of probabilities. The waves...
So this is what they've done to physics. Not only have they, made these idiotic things where I don't even know if Einstein agreed with this crap that you have an electron, then you put another electron in the same exact spot, and then you put another electron in the same exact spot, and you put all the matter in the universe in one little spot. How do you do that? I mean, getting them close together I can understand. Neutron stars, some of the kind of thing. You have electron, proton, you can get them pretty close together. But this is horse shit. You crammed all the matter in the universe into a tiny, infinitesimally small spot. Bullshit you did.
Become distinct like particles only when they are measured. At the point at which the probability wave becomes a distinct particle is called a collapse of the probability wave.
Gotta make his money for this propaganda. At least the religious people don't have commercials. The Christian fanatics aren't, this grotesque.
What scientists have found is that at any point when the width path information, any particle is measured, its probability wave collapses.
So this is just bullshit. There's no such experiments. It's just, they're just saying we did something they never did. So just crap. Just as I closed one of the slits and a spot that was light got dark. They don't have that evidence either.
For the particles to remain probability waves, their path information must remain in absolute secrecy. If at any point any kind
So
of...
again, all this secrecy, it has to be absolute secret. No, you mean you can't interact with a photon or electron without destroying its momentum. Oh, duh! They make these assertions and say, oh, he's going to probably say it. He's probably going to say the typical line, this is the Heisenberg principle, and it's not because these things are so small we can't see them. No. That's not the reason. No. The reason is it can't be seen. It's not that we don't have a magnifying glass big enough to see the thing, right? We can't use a small enough ray to see the tiny little stuff. No, that's not the answer. The answer is it's wooey. It's wooey by nature. It's not wooey by a cause.
measurement is made.
I mean, it's wooey by, woo.
Whether it is seen by anyone or not, the particles become distinct and do not display wave-like behavior. The same behavior has been found in subsequent years with electrons, atoms, and even molecules composed of as many as 800 atoms.
So again, this is more horseshit. It's not the same pattern. It's a terrible pattern. It's barely even their pattern. And it's clearly not the double slit pattern. I mean, you can just go on and on. I mean, this isn't evidence of that has any kind of, this should be evidence of, ooh, it's not very similar. Ooh, it's quite a bit different.
The same interference pattern forms, and the same collapse occurs if their width path information is measured. A measurement always collapses.
So, no evidence that they've done the buckyball, let's say the 100-atom experiment, and actually attempted to detect one of those. Now, those are detectable, right? You can detect a buckyball with shining light on it without destroying its momentum. You might interfere with its momentum a little bit, but you certainly probably could get away with it. But the problem is a photon is much bigger than a single atom or 100 atoms. It's 2,000 atoms big. So the problem is you can't throw a single photon at any atom and ever see it because the photon is bigger than the atom. Pieces of it are, I mean, this is, I shouldn't have to explain this to physicists, but you have to because they're dumb as freaking flat earthers. God, they're so stupid. I mean, they know this. They know this already, right? The polarization of a photon is humongous. So they know elements of the thing are huge. So, I mean, I can't really draw it proportionally because the distances are huge. So this is gigantic. This is the polarization of the photon. The atom is this. Okay, so I'm going to throw this at this little tiny thing and expect this entire thing to bounce back and reflect? No chance. What I can happen is one little piece of it could possibly hit this atom, and then another piece will hit an atom over here, and another piece will hit an atom over here, the electron, and, then I can get something back, okay? But I can't see a single buckyball with light. The light is much too, the buckyball is much too small. 100 atoms isn't nearly big enough for a photon to reflect off. And
is the wave. So what is a measure? A measurement is a formation of any physical record of which path the particle takes. It's not about conscious observers. It's about a record made in the universe, even if no one is looking.
So again, more of this record made in a universe. It's an interaction. Something hits it and something has to bounce off of it. Just like I said, gravity is already screaming at you. It's something real because it doesn't move faster than light. It's clearly something that has to move distance at a speed. So anything you're going to get as information has to travel the distance. You're always going to get a late response. You'll never know anything instantaneously. You can only know something at the speed of force. And so again, even if you could bounce something off of a photon, you'd still be stuck with the limitations. But anyway, it's too stupid. This has never been done. This is just such a lie. This observing electrons, observing single photons, never been done.
It is such that a forensic exam, if we had even the most sensitive quantum tools, could establish which path the particle took. You never have to look at the information. You can even destroy the information before you look at it, like burn it, or destroy the hard drive that it's on. The wave will still collapse because the universe already recorded. Why is it recorded?
Again, it's just this is so disgusting. The universe already recorded it. It's just a lie. Obviously, cause and effect is a chain. The links always exist. You can't say the link wasn't there, the link was magic. No, the links all exist. So the record exists in the fact that only certain paths were taken, and that's just a truth. But it's not written somewhere.
Even if you destroyed it, because theoretically, you could go back in time and see the path. The universe...
Theoretically, you could go back in time. No, you can only do it as an imagination. You can only imagine the path backwards. You can't actually travel the path backwards. So again, this is just such crappy rhetoric. Oh, collapse can still occur if which path information can be found by going back in time. Well, you can't do that.
Will say, hey, I already know the path. Now it's a particle. You can't have your wave back. The path has to be taken in absolute secrecy. The particle has to be informationally isolated.
So again, more nonsense. It can be hit by lots of forces, and as long as those forces are equal, that is, as long as it's jolted to left as much as it's jolted right, its momentum is maintained. So, I mean, there's lots of circumstances where, yes, it could be recorded. Its existence could be recorded. It's just that it requires us doing something that's probably beyond our means, which is shooting photons at an electron from two directions and hitting the same electron at the same exact moment and getting a reflection. What's the odds of that? Oh, pretty thin.
Interference can only occur if it is impossible, even in principle, to find out which path the particle took. Now, as I said, this happens with photons, electrons, atoms, and even large molecules.
So again, it's just all nonsense. It doesn't happen. It's just woo. It's just made up. The evidence is just junk. It's garbage. I mean, this is like somebody finding a stick with a piece of dog do on the end and saying, it's a magic wand from the, goodness fairy.
Now, what if we do this with really large particles, like grains of sand, which, by the way, are typically composed of quintillions of atoms, or tennis balls? Will we see the same pattern?
So they're using two examples which are nothing like water in the sense that the molecules aren't stuck to each other. So not very good examples, frankly. And obviously I would argue that it would work just fine if you make the tennis balls have to hit a surface that's made out of tennis balls. That is where you place the tennis balls and the locations that electrons would be placed in. So create a surface that looks like an atom. That is, there's a tennis ball here, and a tennis ball here, and a tennis ball here, and an empty space between them. And then throw your tennis balls through, and you might find that there's a lot of scatter. That a lot of tennis balls go in all kinds of funky directions. But obviously, you still have to make the tennis ball into a composite object. A photon is a composite object. It has more than one element in it, more than one piece of quanta, more than one lump in the wave. To have a frequency, you need more than one. A tennis ball doesn't have a frequency, for fuck's sake.
Of course not. We'll just see two lines on the other side of the double slit. Why don't we see this behavior with tennis balls? The reason is that large objects are nearly impossible to isolate informationally from the outside world. What do I mean by this? Let's look and see what it would take to isolate a tennis ball. Remember, to do this, we have to make sure that there is no record made anywhere in the universe of which path the tennis ball follows. First, we have to remove all the air and photons in the experiment.
So it's just saying, well, if one atom is hit by a photon, the whole tennis ball has been revealed, so we know everything we need to know about the whole tennis ball, so the tennis ball's been outed as a homo. I mean, this is just so fucking stupid. The reason why is it because your theory is garbage and junk. There is no quantum woo. Oh, God, this is so stupid.
Why? If a photon or air molecule bounces off the tennis ball, then it has potentially recorded the path of the tennis ball. For example, if the photon reflects off the ball, then that could be a measurement because the path of the photon would be changed.
So let's understand, again, my example. If you hit it from both sides at the same time with energy, you wouldn't change its momentum. It would be a non-event for the tennis ball. So if you hit it perpendicular to its momentum with energy from both sides at the same time, it would be a non-event. But it would be a measurement. But you wouldn't change the destiny of the tennis ball at all.
And the bounce path of the photon has recorded the path information of the ball. Potentially, someone or the universe could examine the paths of all the photons in the room, find out how they were affected by the path of the tennis ball, and find out from that information the path that the tennis ball took. And the same thing applies for atoms. We'll also need to cool this tennis.
Can you imagine that this is their convoluted explanation of why tennis balls don't do quantum woo bullshit? And the explanation is so obvious that no, tennis balls aren't flying through empty space, where the nearest electron is a billion light years away. It's not in any way applicable to the circumstance that the nuclear universe is in.
This ball to near absolute zero, because a ball that has any temperature will emit photons due to something called black body radiation. This is a property of all bodies with...
No, due to the fact that the universe is full of pressure and it's constantly hitting stuff and constantly reflecting. But they don't get that part. The cosmic background radiation is constantly bombarding everything with a lot more than just microwaves. And everything is just glowing with those reflections. The universe, the lights in the real universe, the lights are really on. If you could see all of the radiation in the real universe, the universe is a very, very bright place.
Temperature above absolute zero, which is, by the way, negative 273 degrees Celsius, the emitted photons will have recorded the information about the tennis ball, such that someone examining the photons in the room could determine the path of this tennis ball. We even have to worry about the small amount of gravitation that the tennis ball will have. Why? Because this gravitation of the tennis ball will affect nearby atoms. This, in principle...
Oh, bullshit. So that would be an argument you could also make about a laser beam then. So how come my laser beams don't interact with each other because they've now become wave functions because gravity is affecting the light? I mean, you believe light is bent by gravity, so therefore everything's Heisenberged. And so why can't I make my two laser beams interfere with each other?
And allow someone to determine the path that this tennis ball took. The movements of nearby atoms can also form a record of the path of that tennis ball. We have to completely isolate the tennis ball because any information that is leaked to the universe about its path will create a record, even if this information is recorded in one atom. It is still information which has been captured in the universe. And
you people, how can you say this isn't a religion? To talk about the information God who's watching us. And he's figuring out what everybody is and what everybody's doing with his collection of his photonic energy information. This is a religion.
Tennis ball will not be superposition. It will not be a cloud. It will be a distinct entity. Macroscopic objects like this are very difficult, if not impossible, to isolate informationally. So in our everyday experience, we will not see quantum superposition or wave-like behavior of macro objects.
Yeah, we won't see it because we can't make it up. Okay, in the real world, I can take a picture of the goddamn thing. In the real world, I can see it by bouncing photons off it without messing it up. And that's in this real world. Okay, in their fake world, the world with all this magic, I can't do any of that stuff. And the fact that I can't do it is the only reason why they can get away with making up this woo. They can only say it's made out of gingerbread because I can't go to their world, break it in half, and say, no, it's not gingerbread, it's some other kind of bread.
But one principle of quantum mechanics is that it applies to all objects regardless of size. Could the tennis ball behave...
No, so more horseshit. It applies to all objects regardless of size. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Quite obviously it doesn't.
Like an atom, if we could isolate it informationally? This may be true, but there's a measurement problem. We can look at this mathematically. The wave of an object is described by the de Broglie wave function. Lambda equals...
So the whole de Broglie thing is just such a pile of crap. I mean, this de Broglie... let's make fake wavelengths. Let's say Volkswagens, because it's going 50 miles an hour, it has a wavelength of 1 trillion megahertz or gigahertz or whatever. Fuck that. It's nonsense. It doesn't have a frequency. It's just made up. Frequency is not momentum. They've made it momentum, but it's not. It only has to do with tipping electrons. Frequency is important to electrons because electrons have to be knocked out. So it means they have to be hit before they can go back to where they are, right? So you've got an electron that's stuck in a position, a magnet. It's magnetically attached. But to knock it out, you only have enough energy in each quanta to move at a certain distance, but it's not enough. It's not enough distance for escape velocity. But if you hit it twice in sequence and enough, without it having a chance to move back, then you can knock it out. Then 2 inches, right? You need 2 inches of distance. You need 1.5 inches of distance. But each quanta only creates 1 inch of distance. You can sort of understand, though, if I catch it when it's out here at 1 inch and I hit it again, then I got 2 inches and I'm going to be free. That's why frequency is important to electrons. Otherwise, it has nothing to do with momentum. This is just bullshit. Wavelength does not equal any kind of energy.
Planck's constant over mass times velocity. Since the Planck constant is so tiny and the mass m so huge, the wavelength will be extremely small. So the interference pattern for all intents...
Right there, that's the equation where they turned frequency into momentum. Momentum was already a distinct thing. Mass, velocity. You don't need to fuck with that. That works. Okay, you don't need to make this silly qualification. Well, let's give everything an arbitrary frequency and say that's its momentum. When it's not.
...and purposes will approximate no interference. The quantum mechanical behavior of the tennis balls converges to classical behavior. Its interference is so small that it probably cannot even be measured. So the tennis balls and other large objects like our bodies are going to be about as real and air as you're going to get. This is the reason you and I and the cat in Schrodinger's experiment are not in superposition. The cat is not dead and alive at the same time. That's a myth. And there's no possibility of interference patterns being formed in our normal everyday interactions.
Right. See, this is just their excuse. No, it's only in the universe that's very small that all the magic gods and gremlins exist. Just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence that all the magical fairies live in the tiny magical world we can't see. We have to just make them up. Yes, we can't take a picture of them because they're only very, very small. Catch 22 horseshit.
For the same reasons, macroscopic objects like this cannot be entangled in the way photons can be entangled, for example. So what we see macroscopically is a very different world than what we see microscopically. And this is why it's a mistake to extrapolate.
Yeah, it's a mistake to sit there and jump to the most bizarre and silly of conclusions and then contrive evidence and essentially falsify the evidence by presenting it in such a distorted manner. To claim that you have some kind of credibility and making up this woo about fucking ESP particles. It's just such a pile of crap. It's just, God, why do people fall for this shit?
Our observations and equations in quantum mechanics to our everyday experiences. They behave in completely different ways. There are 2 different worlds. Quantum mechanics is what happens when no one is looking. This is what makes it so mysterious.
It's just so bad. No one's looking. Again, they should even know that the cosmic background itself is always looking. They can never escape the gamma rays, all the stuff that's hitting stuff. You can never escape this cell phones and the this and the that and all this stuff. So everything's being measured all the fucking time.
As if it only happens when you're not allowed to look and find out how it happened. Another way to look at this is that macro objects like tennis balls and humans are very intimate.
So isn't it ironic, right? They're saying that if I shoot some photons at an electron, let's say, I will collapse its wave function and it will not create the pattern. But if the universe shoots them, right? If the universe shoots some photons at it, it won't affect it at all. The universe can shoot as many as it wants. It can hit it with photons all day long. And no wave function broken. It's an obvious inconsistency. What sense can that make? What do you mean? How come the universe doesn't collapse the wave function, but the flashlights of the universe, Alpha Centauri isn't collapsing it, but my flashlight is? Horse shit.
Connected to the universe. Our every move and path and even thought is recorded in the particles around us and within us. In this way, our whereabouts and even thoughts become...
So again, just radio waves. Just think of all the stuff that's hitting everything all the time. All the time there's crap just banging into everything from the universe, from even the noise we're making. Even just the noise we're making, the heat of the Earth's surface right now. Why isn't the heat from the Earth's surface collapsing the wave function?
Part of the fabric of the universe. There's no escaping our intimacy with the forces and particles that we are made up of and surrounded by. And in this way, we are at least informationally, indeed, one with the universe. Guys,
so this is all just baby talk. It's all just this. It's the same wooey way they describe the fact that time is some sort of dimension. It's just made out of paradox and nonsense. It doesn't make any sense when you try to connect the dots. Okay, so again, I didn't even think of that argument. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with it, but the argument seems pretty solid that my detector is going to do something very minor to what the electron's already experiencing. The electron's already experiencing fucking shit hitting it from all over the goddamn place. Why is it going to care about my extra photon? Why? Why is that measurement important and all the other measurements don't mean anything? I mean, that's an obvious argument.
I'm going to tell you about a great on-demand video learning service where you can enjoy lectures from somebody.
Yeah, you can learn more shit that like we talk. You can be a shit talker like us. You can talk all kinds of wacky, stupid shit based on vague notions of experiments that have never been conducted and, you know, vague notions of the heroes of science. The young experiment changed the world. It only took 130 years yeah, for it to change. Ugh. Ugh. God damn it. Anyway. Do I want to watch the whole commercial? Oh, why not?
Best professors and educators in the world. I just finished several lectures by Professor Benjamin Schumacher.
Yeah. Oh, this is the fucking Christian guy. Holy fucking shit. Yeah. Christian physics. Amazing. Right? This is the guy that has the actual... Oh, yeah, I closed one of the slits and less light got to the... I opened one of the second slit and more light hit it. Yeah, right. And he's using an error algorithm that eliminated all the photons that were incidental. The ones that did hit at the same time were killed by the get rid of the errors. They were considered errors. So of course when you had less light, it was less likely you'd have two photons at the same time. So of course it worked. Oh, I mean, this is so bad. I can't believe he's going to sit there and fucking, you know, I'm pretty sure it's the same. It looks like the same guy. I mean, come on. This guy is a fucking abomination. The whole way he did the experiment, he just showed one tiny little clip. Okay, I'm going to prove it, you know, in 60 seconds. So he didn't show us the pattern before or after. You know, he didn't show us that he actually has the settings where you would actually see the pattern. No, he just showed that, see, I close one of the slits, the signal gets less. That's it. I mean, I opened one of the slits and the signal went down. It went down because you have an error filter.
On some of the crazy implications of quantum mechanics. One of his lectures, in fact, was an inspiration for this video. If you're intrigued by...
Okay, so that's really saying something, isn't it? I went to the Christian to get some good physics. A fucking Christian, a fucking idiot who hasn't figured out God is a silly fable. So he hasn't figured that out, and you're going to trust him to analyze physics experiments when he hasn't figured out that God isn't God, let alone photons aren't God and ESP particles. God doesn't even have it.
Quantum physics and want to get more in depth, you're going to love Dr. Schumacher and his teaching style. Some of the topics in his course are like quantum computing, quantum cloning, and entanglement. I just love Great Courses Plus, and I'm not just saying that because they're sponsoring me.
Yeah, I think you are just saying it because they're sponsoring you. I think if we could rerun reality, okay, well, we took out the sponsorship, I'm pretty damn fucking sure you're not even going to mention this shit. So lie to me some more.
I would have a subscription to Great Courses Plus regardless. And they're offering an incredible deal right now to Arvin Ash viewers. If you use the link in the description right now, you're going to get a free trial. But be sure to use the special link in the description. And if you like...
Yeah, so I get the money. Be sure to use the special link, because don't go there on your own, because then I don't get the money. So use the special link so I get the money. And everybody else pays more for the service because I have to be paid. So everybody who goes to the website pays more because they have to pay me to do this bullshit.
This video, then please share it with your friends and give us a like. Also, if you have a question, please post it below because I try to answer every one of them. And I will see you in the next video.
I guess I should ask a question then. How much do I have to pay you for me to mock your physics? Like you're a flat earther. You know, I'll just treat you like a flat earther or a religious kook. Oh, fuck.
My friend.
Be my friend. Oh, we're all friends. No, I don't like what you're doing. It's not friendly to the intelligence of the human race. The human race is just getting dumber and dumber because of this bullshit everywhere. Smart people are stupid. Gullible, religious kooks, clearly. All this intelligence just wasted on, oh, how do those electrons know what each other's doing? Oh, ESP, yeah. How do their brains work to create the ESP thing? I wonder how many neurons an electron has. I wonder how. Shit. Oh, I'm so depressed. Endeavor to persevere, Gary. Endeavor to persevere. Alright, I'll endeavor to persevere. But I'm choking on it. It's just killing me. Killing me. It's killing me. What am I doing this for? Yeah, I'm way ahead of myself. See, it's killing me. Just, little by little, I'm just going to get killed by being forced to eat all this nonsense in the world. It's just too disgusting. Why are you people so stupid? How did it happen? How can you know 2 plus 2 is 4 and not know that 3 plus 4 is 7? I mean, it's not that much tougher.